All right. So good evening. My name is Amy Broughton and I serve as the chair of the Water Resources Advisory Board. It's now 6 p.m. and I'd like to call the July 20th, 2026 meeting to order. The first order of business is approval of the June 15th meeting minutes. So did all members present have an opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any questions, comments, or? No? Okay. Hearing none, can we have a motion to approve the meetings minutes?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the June minutes, please raise your hand. Say aye. Aye. Seeing and hearing no, we will approve the minutes and as written with a vote of 3-0. Okay. Next on the agenda is the public comment. And Joanna Bloom, she's our technical host, and she'll provide the rules of engagement. So thank you, Joanna.
You're welcome. And actually, I don't know that we've ever had this happen before, but I don't see any attendees online and nobody in person. So I wondered, I'm happy to do it. But I also can skip it. What do we do?
Is anybody out there?
I don't think anybody's out there. I normally have a list. If you want to wait a couple minutes and somebody pops on.
I can introduce myself here in a second, but the agenda says open comment starts at 6:05. So we could probably start on the first item, and if somebody does show up and wants to speak, we could in between or something like that.
Okay. Oh, we do have one attendee that just showed up, so I will go ahead and read the meeting rules that we follow at Powers.
Right.
Okay, great. Hello, my name is Joanna Bloom and I'm serving as the technical host for this meeting. We're sharing a few slides of the virtual meeting rules we follow that ensure a balance between transparency and digital security. Please provide your full name to participate in open or public comment. If it's not currently displayed, please go ahead and update it in Zoom, and you can contact me at 303-817-1742 for any technical or Zoom connectivity issues. Video control features are limited to city officials, employees, and invited speakers. If you are participating in a comment period, I will unmute you when you're recognized to speak. And after I've unmuted you, please say your first and last name, and we'll begin a 3-minute timer, once you begin your comments. Thanks so much for your participation. And now is the time where you can virtually raise your hand if you're interested in commenting in open comment for the meeting tonight. You see one attendee. You should be able to unmute.
Agenda before, but I haven't had a chance to do it. I'm at 98 degrees in my upstairs bedroom and I'm at 88 degrees in the downstairs part of my house. The city of, oh, can I see the rest of you? I just see my name. I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to you.
Let us see what we can
There,
do.
now I see you.
Great.
When you're talking, I see you.
But you don't see the room.
Now I do.
Great.
When you talk, it switches. Now when I talk, it's back to my name, staring at me in the face.
Okay, how about now?
Now I see you, and I can talk too. Okay, so can you start me now?
Yes, please go ahead. We'll start your timer.
Okay, so anyway, usually I check your agenda first, but I haven't had a chance. And I'm very unproductive when it's this hot, and I'm at 98 degrees in my bedroom and 88 degrees downstairs. And I have to take multiple showers per day to stay cold. I don't know how to make it cold on my shower that's downstairs, but it kind of, I just noticed that as I was cleaning it. But my concern here is is basic survival. I'm 73 years old. I'm at these kind of temperatures in the summer, and I'm at 54 degrees in the winter, so my pipes don't freeze, and 40 degrees in my addition, which is where I live. And it's just I hibernate all winter, and in the summer I just am really I don't know about none. I'm sure none of you live at 98 degrees or 88 degrees in your environments every day. I sincerely doubt that. And I think you ought to just try it out to see what it's really like to live in Colorado, because that's the truth of what we're facing here. And I'm trying to get geothermal, and I've been working on it for 26 years since I bought my house. I'm saving up for it and justifying the expense of it. And it's very costly, but the city of Boulder got me in a program that gives me free uh, mini splits and what have you, but they didn't allow me to have anything to do with the retrofit. So I won't use it. It's completely useless to me. There's a mini split in a room that I don't use. There's an air handler in my attic, and I need my attic to pop it up for storage so I can get a solar roof so that I can feed my geothermal with that. And it's just really messed up my life to have the city helping me out through the county. And the county is gaslighted me from my project because I revealed, and they weren't happy about it, the fact that they were dealing with one of their vendors unethically, a vendor that I spoke to at length. And then when I went back to the county, they said, oh, we dropped that vendor, and they wouldn't tell me why. And the vendor told me why was because they were doing a solar install on someone else's place, not mine. And um, under adverse conditions, the county was forcing them to do it, or dumping them from the contractors list. And I couldn't, so now I don't feel like I can trust the county at all, or the city, because the city supported it. They claimed that they were just enforcing what they were being told. The CARE program, the EOC program, those are state nonprofits. Somebody somewhere had it out for me. And I'm really upset that I have to use so much water now, cold water.
Thanks, Lynn. Your time is up. It is a hot day. Thanks for making time.
Yes, thank you for participating, Lynn. Joanna, is there anyone else?
No, I think that's the only two.
Okay, so our next agenda item is a staff presentation introducing the capital improvement program. And so Joe, introduce this item.
Yes, I can take you from here and I can empathize with the speaker. That just spoke to us. We're having some HVAC issues in our building that we work in. I think it was 86 last Monday when I was working, and definitely gets your attention. But good evening, board members. I'm Joe Tadiucci, Director of the Utilities Department. Our first topic tonight is an information item on our capital improvement program. This is the first of 3 meetings on the CIP and rates, and this is one of the primary that the board acts on each year. So the first in that 3-meeting series is now July, it used to be May. And in this meeting, our goal is just to give you an overview of the situation and mostly a reminder of what we left off last year. We always have a new board member that has just come on when we start the CIP. And so the focus tonight is just a refresher of finances in our 3 utilities and each of the systems and conditions and priorities. Then we'll have the second of the 3 meetings in August, and we'll do a deeper dive into the proposed 6-year capital improvement program and rates for 2027. I would say in this 3-meeting series, that is probably the key one where we focus more on the rate recommendations and specific projects. We clear the whole agenda just to talk about that item on that night, and really want to hear the board's feedback and concerns in that meeting. And then we would come back in September and hopefully have addressed your comments or concerns. And we would be looking for recommendation to city council on the rates and the CIP. And that meeting, the September meeting, would be a public hearing. So our plan tonight is to go through the presentation in segments. Steph Klingeman, our principal financial analyst, will do an overview on the financial part first. And then Chris Douglas, our utilities engineering senior manager, will take over after that, and he'll walk us through each of the systems and each of the three utilities, talk about where we're at for our priorities and how we prioritize. And it's a lot to digest, and so we'll kind of go through the finance first, stop for questions, and then probably stop after each of the three utilities with Chris. But you can interrupt us at any time. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Steph.
So, Steph Klingeman, budget analyst with utilities, Joe walked through the agenda. As he mentioned, if you have questions, feel free to speak up. We've got some natural, I guess, discussion points in these slides, but if you've got a question, feel free to speak up and let us know. So, So the utilities department oversees 3 enterprise utilities funds: our water, wastewater, storm and flood management funds. And these are self-sustaining funds that operate like a business, where services are paid for by user fees rather than taxes. These funds are used exclusively to support the infrastructure, operations, and long-term planning necessary to deliver essential utility services to the community. And unlike the general fund, which is tax funded and supports broader services like public safety and parks, our 3 enterprise funds are limited to utility services with revenues reinvested into those specific systems. So utilities funding sources are generated through the collection of user fees, bond sales, and at times other alternative funding mechanisms like grants. And what I'll walk through these next 3 slides, it's an overview of the 2025 financials by fund. And so we'll start here with the water fund. This bar chart compares the water fund's revenues and expenses for 2025. The far left bar shows what was originally budgeted for 2025. The original budget is always budgeted a year in advance. So what you see here for 2025, we actually budgeted back in 2024. That middle bar there is showing the amended budget in 2025, which does include any unspent capital dollars of 2024 that were rolled into 2025. That's why you see that budget increase in that middle bar. And then finally, actual expenses for 2025 and revenues are represented on the far right. So in 2025, the fund collected about $55 million in revenue, and we incurred about $68 million in expenses. In years where expenses do exceed revenue, the utility relies on fund balance and potentially prior bond proceeds to balance out the year. And I'll just kind of quickly walk through what each of these colors on the graph represent. So green shows the operating expenses, and those remain relatively consistent from year to year, although we do typically increase those with a bit of inflation. Blue represents our debt service payments. So in our utilities budget, debt service refers to the annual payments the city makes to repay borrowed money. That's usually allocated for larger projects. These payments cover both principal, which is the amount borrowed, and interest, which is the cost of borrowing. Think of how you pay off your mortgage every month. And then the dark red reflects those interfund transfer expenses, which is overall a really small amount of our budget, but that money really goes to support internal payments to city funds. So our information technology fund would include an interfund transfer. Any support we pay for our city attorney's office, that would be included in that interfund transfer. And then finally, our largest expense item is reflected in orange, and that is our capital. which tends to fluctuate from one year to another. And I'll just again mention that in 2025, the amended bar really does show that increase in capital, which reflects those rollover funds for unspent capital funding from the prior year. And that's common when we're managing these larger multi-year projects.
Can you elaborate a little more just what happened with the capital funding?
Yeah. So in 2024, we essentially had unspent capital funding that was rolled into 2025. And that's typical for some of our larger projects that are larger multi-year projects. So like the transmission line project that we'll talk about later on, that's a multi-phase project. We have large capital allocated to Patasso. So anything that's just not fully spent is not shown in that far left bar. But we might encumber funds in the prior year that's then rolled into the next year.
It's about what, 50%? How much was it?
Last year, just kind of looking at it, it was about, I can give you the exact number, but yeah, it looks to be about 40 million or so.
That was added in, okay.
Yeah.
And then not actually spent,
Correct. So it's continuing to roll forward.
okay.
And I think said it stuff, but that's many times or most times that's intentional on our part to build up the fund over time for our project. So that we don't have a massive rate spike in the single year.
And that money is effectively committed. There's another slide on here that kind of shows that shows fund balance, sort of like what 1 year's beginning balance and the next year's ending balance is. And so, you know, within the beginning and ending balance, you do have either encumbered funds or committed monies to projects. So that money, you know, is intended to get spent. It will get spent, just because it did get spent in that single year doesn't mean that it's committed to projects will get spent down. Any other questions? So this is a chart that looks at our wastewater fund, again, the 2025 expenses versus revenues. It's organized in a similar fashion to the prior slide. So in 2025, actual expenses were around 45 million, revenues were around 34 million. And again, you see that rollover from 24 into 25 reflected in that middle bar in the 2025 amended budget. It's not as severe as in the water fund, but we also, you know, are managing a lot of projects within our water fund. So. And then just looking at our stormwater and flood fund from 2025. So in 2025, the fund received approximately $26 million in revenue and incurred about $24 million in expenses. But it follows a very similar trajectory to those other two slides. Any questions? And so this is that fund balance slide I was mentioning earlier, Joel. So fund balance is essentially our savings account that we use to allocate across our reserve funds. And it also helps fund our capital projects. It helps absorb our spending spikes without needing to raise rates suddenly or take on additional debt. And we take on a balanced approach using a mix of our fund balance, our rate revenues, and our bond proceeds to responsibly fund our capital needs. So this table assumes that all capital projects, including those carryovers, will be fully spent in 2026. Again, that likely won't happen, but those monies are committed. So we do need to show them drawing down on our fund balance. So yeah, in practice, capital spending will often stretch across multiple years, and like high beginning balances are already committed to these long-term projects. And as the table shows, these funds are drawn down as capital projects are completed. So we have the wastewater fund. Last year, we had a beginning balance of about 55 million, an ending fund balance of around 44 million, with monies that we have committed to capital projects. We are expecting a drawdown in that fund balance to around 14.5 million. at the end of.
Expecting but not expecting.
Right. We need to show that those monies are committed to projects, and it's hard to anticipate exactly when, we might expend most of those. And then this table captures the 2026 approved rate increases. So for this year, we implemented an 8% rate increase for water, a 6% increase for wastewater, and a 5% increase for storm and flood. And also included in this table were the projected rate increases for 27 and 28. In August, we'll plan to bring forward a proposed draft CIP, and the proposed rate increases for 27, 28, 29.
So this number is this just came out of last year.
Correct, yep.
Just a reminder of where we left off last week, what we did for rates and what we were looking at for projection.
And this next slide might be a little bit difficult to read, but I'm happy to walk through any of these components. This final slide is comparing the city of Boulder's current utility bills to those of other Front Range communities. And it's based on average monthly water use for a single family home consuming about 7,500 gallons a month. Our utility bills are on average about 30% higher compared to other Front Range communities shown here, and the second highest overall. I'll just mention that Boulder's stormwater fees have historically been higher than those of many neighboring communities, largely because we face the highest flash flood risk in the state of Colorado. And while our rates do remain high relative to some of these other communities, we have seen in the last couple of years an uptick in rate increases across the board for these other communities.
Yeah, I was talking to some of my peers this last week from around the area, and many of them are thinking about much higher rates than what we showed here.
And some, like Broomfield, has double-digit increase.
We did it a couple of years ago and they continue to increase rates.
I was hearing last week, some are contemplating double-digit increases, and if you think about, if you're familiar with some of the major water projects in the area like this, and just the cost and how those are going up, and the cities that are buying into some of those things, they're faced with a real dilemma.
Well, and because people are dropping out of this, the cost for the people who stay, the
Yep.
cities who stay, is going up.
And they need the water.
Yeah.
And I think that's it for my set of slides. So unless there are other questions, we can move into the next phase.
So, good evening, board. I'm Chris Douglas, the utilities senior manager, and it's my team that manages and coordinates the capital project. So what I'm gonna do tonight is, now that we've talked about the fund structure, is for the next series of slides, I'll share our annual CIP process. So we start our internal budget discussions in January for the next year. Each year, each utilities team that has a role in planning, implementing, operating, or maintaining capital assets participates in a series of fund level meetings to discuss and debate priorities. The outcome of these meetings is the draft CIP that we'll be discussing for the next few months. Next slide. There's a lot of influences on capital projects, as you can see on this slide here. Of note is the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, which is in the final stages of the affordable housing approval process. It will be happening a little later this year. The biggest driver for utilities projects is the board bullet item related to rehabilitation and replacement of aging infrastructure using our asset management systems. Next slide. We prioritize projects based on likelihood of failure compared to the consequences of failure. You'll also see we use a utility area condition index score, UCI. You'll see these UCI scores on some of the following slides. The UCI number represents a cost-weighted remaining useful life. This number is expressed as a percentage and indicates the remaining value of the system relative to its replacement cost. If the entire system were brand new, it'd have a UCI of 100. These numbers help us compare a wide range of different life cycle cost assets. Another way to think of how we look at our assets is what we call the traffic light concept. So in green, yellow, and red, where red is kind of shown in this slide is that area where you have a project we want to address first because it has the highest risk or consequence if it were to fail. Next slide. Now, let me take a moment to explain this figure on how we analyze and look at costs. So this figure shows the various cost estimating ranges based on project development from left to right or class brown box across the bottom. Simply put, the more detail we have for a project, the more confident we are in the cost estimates and the plus minus range of the cost narrows. So that's that funnel going from left to right in blue. And in August, you'll see the 1-year capital improvement recommendation for 20.7 in the context of the 6-year capital improvement program. Next slide. So maybe now is an opportunity before we just talk about each of the utilities in a little more detail. If there are any questions on the big picture capital improvement process that we're going through.
Can you show that prior slide again? Just walk us through.
Absolutely. So across the bottom, generally speaking, as we go from lower left to right is really a class 5 to a class 1. And that's class 5 is we're in the very early or conceptual stages of a project. But as we get more and more data, we have more and more detail. So really it's the plus or minus range narrows down. So when we're starting a project, a lot of it in the CIP is we're in this conceptual range. So we could be plus 100%, minus 50% on our level of accuracy. But then as we get closer to projects in the 1 year, the next year, the CIP, that's where we're probably in that class 2 or class 1 range. So we may be somewhere in the 20% plus or minus on our cost estimate. So it's really just trying to go through. We end up with a really wide spectrum and try to narrow down the more detail we get. So and that's really, it is an industry standard conversation piece.
And this is like plus or minus 20 until you actually have an RFP or something.
Well, that might even be plus or minus 20 to where we're in, say, something like a 60% design with our engineers.
Okay.
To where then when we get down into that class 1 is about that time that we actually go out to bid and we get a contractor.
You understand that as we go from conceptual design, our cost estimates get more and more precise.
But it's still plus minus 20. Or $10 million. It's still a lot of money.
Right.
Well, and I would say since COVID, with the volatility of costs, it's even gotten trickier to estimate. And I know of some other municipalities that have had to delay or cancel projects just because they're such unpleasant surprises that way.
And it has gotten better since COVID, but it's still difficult to do. And the other aspect of it is with the spikes we saw in COVID, we haven't seen prices go down. The rate increases have slowed, but we're not seeing anything going back to pre-COVID pandemic.
That's what inflation is.
Yeah, and exactly. Or even, and if you remember in the RAB memo, we talked about some comparisons related to inflation and how we're seeing inflation being in that 2 to 3% range, but construction cost indexing is more in that 3 to 5% range.
What about tariffs? Is that
Tariffs there's a factor in that, and that it does get incorporated into construction costs. But are we specifically doing things for tariffs? No, we're trying to incorporate more of a general inflationary cost increases we do our CMP plan.
I might just add at this point, I think that I've said it before to the board, but the mission that's in front of this generation of staff right now, the dilemma we have is we've got billions of dollars worth of infrastructure, just maintaining what we have. And components, you know, some things can last 100 years or more if we really take care of them, but most components have a 50-year life cycle or less. And how to replace everything and keep it running for the generations to come without bankrupting our customers and is.
But also ensuring water supply.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we appreciate having the board and being able to kind of discuss this with you and share our thinking.
And certainly it's the timing on everything as well, because things were installed in almost distinctive generations. So you think there was a big boom in the 60s and the 70s, and you know, some of the 80s. Well, a lot of that stuff in the 70s is reaching that 50-year life that Joe's talking about, and we can't replace it all at once. So it's finding the right timing as well.
In the context of the capital improvement program, this is conveying, we are going to focus on 2027. The budget that we recommend is 2027, but we have a window to look ahead, to try to get a handle on what other projects are coming up. And we know that the further we are from those projects, the more uncertain a lot of those cost estimates are. And so we're closer now, so we're zeroing in, but we're going to be getting a look ahead that includes this less certainty.
And then that, as we look at that 6-year window in the context where Steph talked about earlier, the fund balances. So a lot of that is planning our fund balances today for those projects that are coming up in 5 or 6 years. So we'll see some of that in that 6-year CIP next month, or even in the one from last year that was in the packet, where we see that estimated fund balance getting low as we go out into future years to be able to do those big projects. So the next series of slides, we'll talk about each of the 3 utilities individually, and then I'll pause the questions as we go through each one. But the water utility is made up of a source water system and a treated water system. And we'll go through actually those individuals in a little more detail, because they are pretty complex. And then in the wastewater system, talk about the 2 components in collection and treatment. And then in the storm and flood utility, talk about stormwater conveyance, which is smaller annual rainstorms that we get every year versus the big, larger flood projects. So we can go to the next slide. Then this slide, so we'll talk about the source water program. Source water program is made up of storage and conveyance, think pipelines and some river flood and river conveyance and hydroelectric facilities. And go to the next slide. So Boulder water supply comes from 3 sources identified on this map. The sources are the Colorado Big Thompson project, identified in green, that conveys water to the Boulder Reservoir Water Treatment Plant. And then there's also the Middle Boulder Creek and North Boulder Creek basins, identified in blue on the left of this. But they convey water to the Potassium Water Treatment Plant. The system consists of 15 dams owned and operated by the city, plus additional infrastructure owned and operated by the Colorado Big Thompson project. Approximately 1/3 of the city's water supply comes from each of our sources. Slide. Now we'll talk about the 3 conveyance systems in the source water system. So this, and you'll see more of the traffic light, green, yellow, and red motif. So the Boulder Reservoir Water Treatment Plant has 3 sources identified in the slide from the Northern Colorado Water District. And then you can see that we have a surface water canal in yellow, and then a newer what is called the Southern Water Supply Pipeline that's identified in green. So that's that, again, showing that newer system.
So is the water switched from the canal to the pipeline, or are both being used?
We can use both options. The preferred option is the pipeline.
Yeah.
Because it allows us to have more control on that end and allows us to control more things on, particularly in the water quality.
I would just add that Northern Water still uses the canal for delivery of water to Boulder Reservoir for other allottees that they have.
For the irrigation.
When was that canal built?
CBT 1980. 19.
I don't know.
Older res.
I will find out. It's now,
Pipeline, we did.
the pipeline is, 2018.
That's right.
The reservoir is 54 or 57, right after the drop.
So and that's the time frame of the canal doing this.
The canal might have preceded, so we don't know,
I will double
So
check.
it's 70 years old.
at least.
Yeah.
I mean, it delivers irrigation water as well, and it was probably there before well, actually, I don't know that it did precede the irrigation water. It's probably, my bet is 54 to 57.
Because was Boulder a part of the initial project was in the 1930s.
And we were not.
We were not.
It was not part of it at that point. So-
We got in later. Yep. If you've been on the board between 2006 and 2018, you would have heard me present on the Carter Lake pipeline probably 13,000 times.
It's true.
So
Will the city have to support replacement or repair of the canal if it goes past East Flood?
I am not sure how the canal works. I think the way all of their infrastructure works, you buy into an enterprise for those structures, and you actually, we're funding the replacement costs of the Carter Lake pipeline year in and year out as we go. I don't recall if it was set up that way for the canal.
Well, but there are other shareholders, so it wouldn't be the whole.
Yeah, no.
It would not be the city would not be.
Right. 100% right, good point.
So might have some.
Yeah.
obligation. I'm just curious, like, last year or any time recent time, the sheer water that's coming through the pipeline versus now.
I think that'll be one, let me circle back for one of the sources to use.
Yeah, it does. So, yes, so Joanna, but I can give you rough estimates. So
Yeah.
it's, there's a lot of irrigation water that flows through there in the summer. It's a little over 200
Yeah.
CFS that still gets delivered and stored in the reservoir and then delivered to irrigators.
Okay.
Whatever goes through the pipeline is primarily used by the municipalities, and that, probably know the capacity of that better than I do, but it's like closer to 50 to 70 CFS versus the 200 in the canal. So they still run both because of the huge pipe they would have needed for the irrigation water, but we don't rely on it as much.
And I don't know that they're always running at capacity.
But there was a lot more, there was much more the best in Canada.
Yes, yes, that's.
Next slide. So this slide shows the North Boulder Creek facilities. So you can see that the series of dams on this slide from left to right, Cascade into Silver Lake Dam where store most of the North Boulder Creek water. And then that eventually flows to the Potassic Water Treatment. So I'd like to highlight a couple of projects, particularly around Silver Lake Dam, as there are components that are aging. And we have some projects in the 6-year CIP that we're beginning to develop some rehabilitation project with Silver Lake Dam. I also wanted to highlight one CIP project that is currently under construction in 2026. Next slide. And this is the Albion Dam project, which is currently being rehabilitated at Treeline. So this photo shows the contractor completing the second to last concrete pour on the upstream base of the dam. This work is slated to be completed in fall or early winter of 2026. Then go to the next slide.
And is
Yep.
it, it's green because you're assuming that the rehabilitation is done?
Yes. So if anything, this is a green red because, and really, most of this project is the dam is functioning. It really needed, we needed to add some more stuff to it, but it really is a facelift to get it that dam to last another 100 years. Excuse me. So now this is the Middle Boulder Creek system, with the components of Barker Dam, the Barker Gravity Pipeline, and then Penstock Pipeline that deliver Middle Boulder Creek water to the Patasso Water Treatment Plant. Immediate priorities in this drainage basin are the Barker Gravity Pipeline and Penstock rehabilitation, which the city's been doing over the last several years. And staff is also starting a comprehensive risk assessment of the Barker Dam, and they're characterized and understand the risks associated with this asset and begin to develop a rehabilitation plan if necessary. So,
Risk of what? Get rid of the big dams.
well, it is a big dam, and there have been over the years several major capital improvement projects. So as we look at that dam, also in the context of regulations as they understand more, we're putting that in that context, in particular around this concept of this risk analysis is what is the biggest bang for our buck to minimize our risk, still have a safe dam? Is it a major multi-year, multi-million-dollar capital improvement project? Possible. But we need some more data to be able to understand that before we go into and do a major upgrade.
This dam has not been characterized as a high hazard dam.
This is the high hazard dam.
It is a high
Yes,
hazard.
it is.
Marker, even though it's yellow.
But so it's yellow in the fact that of its condition is in that word caution. So from a risk perspective, it is a high hazard dam because it's
So,
Boulder Creek and the city of Boulder downstream.
But it's conditioned that
So
Just
that,
like any of our infrastructure, it can be really old and need to be replaced. It could be in the middle of its life and need upgrades, or it could be brand new. But the consequence of failure
right.
is where the hazard rating comes in. It doesn't have that high hazard classification, just to be really clear to the public, doesn't have anything to do with the condition of the dams or that. Yes, it's.
That's the most, that's the most, the highest tension.
It's the highest rating
Yes.
that you can have, yep.
Okay.
And generally, large dams like that hold back, that are deep and hold back a lot of water and have a lot of height to the dam. If you think of that failing and all of that water being released in Boulder Canyon, that would have some consequences. And so a number of our larger dams have that rating.
But it's much higher.
Yeah.
and that is the highest risk dam that we have in our system.
Right, and you say it's aging, I mean, what is it, what kind of specifics on what is aging?
The dam itself is 1906. And so then they did some upgrades in the 40s and the 80s. And now we're taking new modern dam design and we're applying that's this next level of that. What we're doing is taking those new design efforts and going, okay, what information do we really want to know about this dam to go, okay, does that lead to further understanding of that risk? So what we're looking at is how we can lower the risk and what we need to do to lower that risk.
Regulations become more stringent on those types of facilities, just like they do at a wastewater plants or water treatment. Could be water quality regulations, dam safety regulations have become more stringent. So we'll be going through a really thorough analysis to see if there's things we need to do to meet those standards. But it's an important facility, and we do not take the safety
And then something, I mean, I'm just looking at the list of projects, something like skyscraper dam, which is in bad shape. Might not be high risk, but it's in bad shape. It's not a high enough priority to be in here for the next 6 years.
And that's where we're taking it from almost as another program to be looking at, okay, as we go through in our inspections with the state engineer, there's things that need to be addressed on all dams. So how we can make sure we're focusing on, we've got to focus on the big dams, but then we're also maintaining some of those smaller dams as well. So it is trying to approach really from a dual perspective. So is it a capital project, or is it maybe we just need to do some additional maintenance items on some of those dams too?
So what's the nature? Why is skyscraper in red?
Skyscraper in red it's an older facility. It does not hold as much water and is upstream from the system, and we're working through trade-offs. And actually part of what we're doing is the risk analysis concept that we're doing on Barker, and we're also doing on Silver Lake Dam, is applying that to all the rest of our dams as well.
Everything that's upstream.
Yeah, or even if you go back the slide, the other slides that are in the Creek system is looking at all of the dams in that concept of risk and consequence of risk to help us evaluate. So that's another version or another way to look at it. We talked about that UCI condition index score. It's now we can put them all on that same comparative aspect and go, oh, okay, if there is something in skyscraper, maybe we need to approach that more than another one. Put them in context with each other.
Consequence of failure to cover that low consequence.
That's a relatively low consequence in that concept of how they evaluate what's the impacts if there was an issue with and downstream users that get impacted.
Can you go back to the upper to
Sure.
I just want to, I can't remember.
Go back 2 slides or 1 slide. Yeah, but this one.
So like with Green Lake Dam, similar thing with skyscraper, or what's going on?
Similar concepts, and there are
smaller volume of water, not as much of a, like, we can't prioritize it over like Barker Dam and some of those structures that hold a much bigger percentage of the city's water supply. So we'll fit those other dams in, I think, over time opportunistically. When we get further down the road with some of the bigger ones, but that's the story there.
And that's the story there. Also that benefit, as you can see, all of those other dams that filter down to Silver Lake. So we have that, we have the system to be able to help as well.
How big is Silver Lake relative to the park?
It's about 4,000 acre feet as compared to 12,000 in Barker.
So a third.
And Albion's like 1,000, some of the smaller dams are 300 or 400.
Yeah, and so going from here, I just wanted to point out one of the projects that we were actively working on, which is the Barker Gravity Line. And really, this picture just shows contractors from the 2025-2026 winter construction season. We're replacing a siphon, which is a gravity on that system, which should give you an indication of the type of terrain that we're working at with this pipeline. So, and before next is into the treated water system, but maybe any other questions that we might be thinking about on the source water system. So I really appreciate these questions as we go along.
You know, it might be nice, I don't know if I could splice a table with size of dams.
Yep, we can definitely do that.
Keep that. Thank you.
When's the pipeline or the pipeline that goes from the top floor getting into the, I forget what it's called, outside.
They go back to slide center.
The gravity line.
So the gravity line that goes from Barker Reservoir to Costland Reservoir, which is actually up on Flagstaff.
And then the one that goes from.
And then one that drops down to the hydro station right before the tunnel as you're driving up Boulder Canyon, and then actually goes back up right to Castle Water Treatment Plant.
So when is that project?
That'll be in the CIP, and I don't remember the exact years, but that's after we've got about 2 to 3 more years on the Barker gravity line, and then we're gonna pivot to looking at the Comstock pipeline. And we're actually looking in the next couple of years, we're looking at an analysis process, because that's again another leading pipeline. But what's the right rehabilitation? Because we're not thinking it's something that we totally need to replace that pipeline. But what can we do with its current condition to be efficient with our funds?
And that includes like some fire mitigation work.
And we've actually just completed this year, this winter, we did some fire mitigation work in, I'll call it that right away, or that alignment of the pipeline. We worked with, and our water quality team got some grants, and we did do some thinning in that area.
That was the hydro plant.
That was up from the hydro plant.
It looks like the Barker gravity line's projected to be completed 2028.
Yeah, so it's 2028, and some of it is what we've got left to do on that line, it's the hard stuff. So we think it's 2028, depending on how some things go and what's required, it could be, we could push it in. I am pushing the team to let's get it done, because we need, that's probably the biggest thing that I need with the team is let's come up with these projects, let's work these projects, get them done. So we can move on to the next thing, because that's the best reduction of risk we can have is get through these things.
And I know we got a lot to get through here, but in my tenure at the city, in my career and where I started, I remember going through that pipeline early on back in 2005, 2006. And it's kind of like a buried irrigation canal, the way it runs, so it's not under pressure most of it. But the concrete was in such bad shape when we purchased it from Public Service Company that if you took a kitchen spoon, you could scoop out the concrete in the bottom, like it was all just deteriorated. Wow. And it was a big concern for me, and we've just made ground on that, and I can't tell you, like seeing that most of that's green now, not red, it's huge.
Because you put another liner with inside.
And that's really the team came up with a very innovative approach to put a liner in that pipe instead of having to, frankly, in that mountain, try and dig it up and have something new. So it's fascinating to see the team start.
Would have been 10 times the cost.
Yes.
And how much you lost capacity by putting something?
It's a nominal capacity loss. So we're adding
It's a smoother pipe. I mean, that old pipe was in really bad condition. Joints every, I don't know, 3 feet. So it's a smoother pipe. So even though it's smaller in diameter, it can carry the resistance well.
Cool.
I was just flipping through the table. So the largest single item as a capital improvement is the Barker Dam. 35 million.
and that is in the CIP, that 35 million was we were looking at moving forward the outlet works or the valves that control the water coming out of the dam. Again, that's that older system. We know we need to replace that, but we have since taken a step back and said, let's look at the dam holistically instead of, in that concept of do no harm on the dam. If we wanted to take a step back and look at the whole dam and look at a capital project in conjunction that includes the outlet works if we need to do that.
And the intent of tonight's meeting is to give us like the framework.
Yes.
And then next month, we're gonna get more into the specific project.
Yes.
More questions about kind of what
Yes.
the plan is for 2027. Okay, but this is just helping us to get the pieces.
Get the pieces, and certainly in that aspect of, for instance, things like the Barker Dam outlet works, talk a little bit more in that concept of what is the plan around Barker that you see in CIP.
So let's not ask too many more questions, because we're like.
He likes questions, dude.
Well, I think we have two items tonight and I'm watching the clock and I think we're doing okay. We can get done by 8, but we might want to pick up the pace a little bit.
Chris is like, I have an encyclopedic knowledge of the system. I love the opportunity to talk about it. Joanna's like, it's 4,000.
Saying that, Amy.
But maybe I'll jump into the treated water system and here we'll talk about the 2 treatment plants that we have, the transmission system, so think the large pipes, anything 12-inch and larger is to move or think the skeleton of the system to deliver water, and then the distribution system is to get everything out to all of the different blood vessels or small diameter pipes. So then the next slide, I just wanted to give you a spatial representation on the Boulder Reservoir treatment plant out of Boulder Reservoir in the upper right-hand side on the star on the east side of the city, and then the Patasco water treatment plant on the just out on the western edge of the city, up off of Boulder King. So now just kind of do a couple of little slides, excuse me, on each of the treatment plants. So lots going on here, but really the intent here is to show there's lots of components, but looking at that, again, that traffic light motif, as we look into the CIP, we're looking at the areas in red, which is the backwash tank, campus buildings, and then also the chemical feed system. So it's addressing those areas, and really we've done in 2017, done several different projects leading up to really where the Boulder Reservoir treatment plant is. And then looking at the Patasco plant, Patasco plant's in pretty good shape because we've done a major capital improvement in 2017, and we're on the tail end of another major capital improvement that we'll be finishing off here in 2026. But again, we have to be looking at the backwash tank and the disinfection and chemical feed systems. And actually, at both Patasco and the Boulder Reservoir plant, we are under contract now as consultants to help us on that, addressing those chemical feed systems. So you'll actively see some of that in the CIP. And then go ahead to the next slide on the transmission system. So transmission system, think the big pipes. And that's similar to the 63rd water treatment, or excuse me, the 63rd water line project that we went to the site tour last year. That's in that transmission side of things, and looking at the storage tanks and transmission pipelines are areas that we need to address CIP. So this next slide shows really the layout of the system, and the big thing you can see is in the transmission is how we pump and convey the water through the system. So you'll see that in green, the 63rd water treatment plant pumping system and also the 63rd pipeline are now in green. And we have several large projects that we need to be actively moving through on the system. And this is one of those areas where it takes a long time to move these projects. So we need to be continually stepping through, and you'll see more transmission pipeline projects in CIP as we come through next month.
You're showing a lot of transmission line coordination. How poor was the risk of failure?
It's in that realm of it's nearing the end or at the end of its useful life. So you look at industry standard useful life versus its conditions. That on the 63rd pipeline, it was in pretty good condition when we pulled that pipe out.
Yeah,
but it was
near the end of its life.
It was near the end of its life. It's at
On
the
paper.
on paper. But then we have 17 miles of pipeline, that same generation of pipeline that we need to replace.
But this is not like you're taking a spoon, digging it into the pipe.
No,
it's not like that.
Yeah, no, and it's not.
Public sees that, oh my God, look, these things are about to fail.
Well, that's, I mean,
It's in red, yeah.
it is-
It's not what this means, right, yeah.
these are valid assessments that are being done. We're not trying to scare people.
Yeah, no, no.
It all sort of speaks to the dilemma we have, like, how do we keep rates manageable, but how do we also keep our system reliable? And the one comment on the 63rd line is, yes, it was in decent condition when we pulled it out, but in the industry over time, that particular type of pipe, the industry learned is really problematic and shouldn't have made its way into systems 40 years ago. And so it's not easy to repair, and the consequences of failure and the areas it's in our system, like it needs to be, we just need to get.
replaced, it's not.
Yeah.
And it's also, as we look at replacing, in this particular case, we look at capacity, so it's age, but it's also like or capacity for the system. So we look at age, capacity, and how it relates to other projects that we need to do in the system. So it's not just we're replacing it because it's old, but it has those other concepts that allows us to do even different projects within the system or make the system more reliable.
The two that are highlighted, I'm sorry, those are the color, that's
The two tanks is the Chautauqua tank and the Kohler tank. And again, those are key components to the system, but then they are also old, and we've been doing projects to keep them going, but it's again one of those another big difficult projects, and being able to plan and having a long lead out on what that planning process is.
And in our memo, you gave us the heads up that like, you know, we're talking about it within the framework of the system, but all of this is burbling up from these master planning and other planning initiatives that have highlighted the priorities for the.
Yes. And we continue to refine that master planning process and getting more things to how we can compare, because we are at a point of, with the limited resources we've got, what's the right project to choose? And bringing that information back to you to help you understand what we're recommending. And then the distribution system is, think of the small diameter pipes. And this is actually the single highest dollar value piece of infrastructure that we have in the water system. But just think it's the hundreds of miles of these small pipes. And so, and you can see green represents the pipeline replacement we've done since 1994 when we started the distribution replacement system program. So we still have a long way to go, but it's continuing to address those things, keep chipping away at this program. Yes, it's important for those individual users when it's the pipe that's out in front of your street. And that's the treated water system. And
there's one item there. There's something in red. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious why it's in red.
Yeah, in each of the,
I'll go back a slide, Steph. Are you?
no, he's talking about the financial
spreadsheet.
Table. It's the BWTF disinfection capacity and corrosion control. I'm just wondering why that's in red.
Oh, I think that's in the CIP,
Oh.
Um,
Okay. In the table back in July of last year, when we did the approval process, we noted things that were changes from the June meeting to the July meeting by putting them in red. So now, I don't remember specifically on that one, but typically it's something along the lines of between the RAB meetings, where we present the detail, and then when we go to the election, we say, hey, this is something that's changed, just to let the board know.
Okay.
So now moving into the wastewater program. So it's made up of the collection system and then the wastewater treatment that's at our water resources recovery facility, or WRRF. So we'll interchange a little bit on that. And so we have many projects in the wastewater program, but we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. And so here, this slide represents after the 2013 flood. City Council created and funded an aggressive 20-year program to reduce infiltration into the sanitary sewer system and rehabilitate that aging pipe. So that's represented by this photo, I put two photos on the left here, whereas the photo on the extreme left shows a pipeline before we rehabilitated it. And then it's the same pipeline on the right of those lower photos, where what we're doing is we're installing an internal line and basically inflating that pipe. They're creating a new pipe in its place. So it's that trenchless rehabilitation program, which is primarily what's shown in the pipe graphic, where you can see the lines in green is what we've lined. In blue are plastic pipes that are in good shape and don't need lining. And then the areas in red are those older pipes that we haven't addressed yet. So, and then we're on track for completion of this program in 2035.
This is just quickly, this was one, the sewer rehab and the storm and flood system. It was 2014 or 2015, we brought a rate proposal forward. Council said it's not aggressive enough, and they asked us to accelerate it. And I think, I can't remember which utility was which, but one of them had a 75% rate increase, and the other one,
I believe the wastewater program is 75%. And that's what allowed us to aggressively go after this program.
How much does that reduce the time it's gonna take to do all the
it
replacement?
this went from 100 years down to like 20.
20, or from 100, wow.
And then the next slide, just wanted to highlight the from the wastewater master plan, thinking that the large interceptor or the large diameter sanitary sewer pipes that convey water to the WRF. And we've just recently completed the second of these major projects, what we call main sewer interceptor improvements in 2025. So the increased wastewater pipeline capacity for these projects will improve wastewater flow from the majority of the city. So we've got a plan to look at, as you see here, to get through all of these major interceptor projects in the near future. And then moving on to the water resources recovery facility. This graphic shows the condition of the major treatment processes on the WRF campus. So overall, the WRF's in pretty good shape, but there are exceptions. So we're actively addressing the clarifiers in red, and we're in the final acceptance stages to complete the phosphorus upgrade project, which included blowers in the bottom left-hand corner of the figure.
Saw those last month.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, and so Cole went into a lot more detail last month that I will not go into here. And that's the quick hit on the sanitary and the wastewater program, and then we'll go into, unless there are other questions, we'll go into the storm and flood program.
I just don't want it, it's in 29, you've still got 17 million for temperature red compliance, but Cole said maybe that's not, that
And
might
that's,
come out, is that?
that is a possibility, but since we are looking at, we don't know when that permit is going to be released. There is a version of, we know we've got a big project. So it's when we go through the regulations, if it comes out, great, but until we know, we're planning.
It's staying in there.
It's that project and keeping it in.
Cause it just dwarfs everything else.
It does. And even here recently, I think when Cole talked about it, that's an area where it's still rapidly evolving right now from the regulated environment.
Okay,
Is that a cooling tower?
And
Yeah.
that was where it was that meeting temperature compliance in the shoulder seasons. It could eventually be something like a cooling tower, that getting a feeling that it's not going to go there, we don't know yet.
thanks.
So we're going to the storm and flood program, which is made up of stormwater conveyance, water quality, and then the flood drainage ways. We have projects on multiple aspects on this. For example, the picture shows a rehabilitation project that we did along Bear Canyon Creek over the last year. and it was to address bank erosion on the side of the creek that was encroaching on the trail. And this work helped protect the trail, improve the creek stability, and enhance safety for the users. So that's the top picture before and the bottom picture. Then in the, this map identifies the diverse stormwater piping system. This system of pipes collects runoff from summer rainstorm. The city is currently in the 4th year of a conditions assessment of the system. And it's anticipated to take 8 years to complete that assessment. And the assessment has led to 2026 local drainage improvement projects at Grant and Aurora Avenue, 14th and Spruce and 9th and Spruce. And it's also led to addressing local drainage improvements that are included in the cross-departmental project in Chicago.
These are all separate from.
Yes, this is all separate. So this is all separate jurisdictions. This system collects the stormwater runoff from curb and gutter.
Yeah.
And collects it and sends it either to a drainage way or into a larger collection system. So it is that, again, that just specific for rain collection.
And during the 2013 flood,
But a lot of what happened in the 2013 flood was with the volume and a lot of these, the storm collection system getting clogged. And then which led to backups. So that's a part of why we're doing this continuing assessment program. And we do something similar in the wastewater program where it's just like, let's take the entire system here on an 8-year cycle. And let's keep it clean. And are there things that we need to address?
these are, I'm just looking at the, so you're doing for 2 and 5 year storms based
Correct.
on historic storm levels or projected?
Stuff. It's more based on what's feasible for the system.
It's just.
I know what you're getting at, but it's kind of like the floods in the future that we consider 100-year flood now will be less or 500.
Whatever, it'll be 50 or who knows, right, whatever, yeah, exactly.
That logic doesn't really apply as much to the conveyance system.
Just sort of what's possible.
Yeah.
This is what you can, this is what you can get, not yet.
It is a little bit of what's possible, but as we go in and do and addressing things and we're adjusting our stormwater model, we are accounting for that. Future growth.
But I'm similar with the South Boulder Creek, people go 500 years, it's just not feasible.
That's more the major drainage ways that I think Chris is going to talk about next. And this is the system that collects water on streets and stuff outside of those and feeds those major drainage ways.
But it's if you have a 10-year or 20-year storm there, but it's just not, the system is just, it's not going to be able to handle it. Just, I mean, just the way it is, but people need to understand that.
Yeah, but it's also in those types of events, it becomes more the major drainage ways that are handling the volume. And your streets and things can flood temporarily, and they can become part of the conveyance system. In the 2 or 3 days it's raining.
Yeah.
And before we go into the flood system, I'm going to talk about water quality. The next slide. So the water quality program not only seeks to comply with our state water quality regulations, but also to educate the public and improve water quality through better understanding of issues and enhanced stewardship. The city's water quality program conducts various water quality monitoring and special studies along the creeks, including things like implementing studies related to the E. coli total maximum daily load implementation. And then touching on the flood program. So these are those large 100-year flood yard storms that you're talking about. And the map really shows we're trying to get and have a 100-year flood conveyance capability where we stand. And so you can look at the different colors on the map where you're trying to get to that darker red 100-year storm, but you can see where we have various levels of conveyance capability within the system. So the comprehensive storm and flood master plan has taken those 16 major drainage ways, dividing them up into projects and trying to get to that 100-year conveyance level where practical.
We're practical.
And that's so it's the where practical, because we look at, there may not be frankly enough space given in any particular construction, any particular reach to put that conveyance. So let's get as much as we possibly can in that corridor.
Just, yeah, well, it's a lot going on. So just a comment, you would, if you really want to do this as a risk analysis, we want to know what's there that can be flooded, what's the value.
And actually, that's,
You know, so you could compare that to what level of protection you provide.
and that's part of the rank, that was included in the ranking analysis that I did with comprehensive storm flood. Yes. But then we did take it to the next level on including equity and benefit. So it's not truly the traditional. Yeah, I know.
Fair enough. Okay, right. But these, I'm just trying to look, these are very different conveyance levels. So I mean, it's fair to assume that where there's just 5-year, these are in red, that's right there. Do those have lower consequences than the, or not?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So those are some of your higher priorities.
Those are some high priority projects, but not necessarily the highest priority, even though it may have a 5 conveyance. But it is a concept where can we do the most benefit.
We'll get copies of all the stuff.
Yes. Wonderful. Sounds good. And then finally, just in summary, we're making significant progress on our priorities. And we're going to have continued capital needs within all 3 utilities. But we manage projects for cost. But then as we talked about, we're trying to manage and being aware of the continued increase in cost. And we'll talk about schedule for the upcoming projects in more detail next month. And then again, thank you for your time on this, and we'll get more into the 2027 to 2032 CIP program next month. So certainly open for any other questions that you may have.
Question about how you're all thinking about the uncertainty regarding revenue related to drought restrictions and just how we're bringing in funding for these kinds of programs and how that could potentially change as we ask folks to conserve water in the future. And if there was something about that, sure. Yeah, elaborate a bit more. Yeah, I can maybe Mr. Passenger got anything to add. So far, we're seeing water demand trend at about average, so we haven't seen a massive impact on those water revenues this year. It's not to say that we might not face some revenue shortfalls in future years. We've seen revenue shortfalls happen in wetter years, but we do have a resiliency reserve set up right now, and it's about 10% of our rate revenues. And so we keep that reserve maintained year over year in the event that we do see lower revenues for the water utility.
So does that act as like a rate stabilization fund?
Exactly. So it's kind of like this buffer that you're building in case there's where there's like this year. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Just having something, we can't really cut in our operation and without the just critical things. And so having a plan for if there's a downturn for some reason, I think this came to our attention during COVID and seeing how hard hit other cities were and other city departments were, and so it felt prudent to create a reserve for those situations.
Cool. Any other questions for Chris? Or any other staff? Okay. So let's move on to the next agenda item. So staff's gonna be providing an update on the rate study and, Joe, do you want to introduce this?
Yep, and I'm still feeling good about the prediction for 8 p.m.
Are you?
Done by 8, yep. No, I think this one might be quite a bit quicker, and I sent you all an email. I should have noted it on the agenda, but this is a presentation only. There was no memo for it. It's an update on the rate study, just a few reminders. When we're talking about a rate study, we're really talking about the mechanics and formulas for how we bill, not as much about the overall total revenue. And on the water budget rate study combo, we've been before the board a number of times already. Talked about water budgets. I think in March we had a kickoff on the rate study. And so since March, we've really been getting into the analysis. And last week, and part of the reason we didn't have a memo is last week we met with some of the larger commercial and industrial users and talked to them about a couple of options on how we build them. And so that'll be one of the points of emphasis tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff.
Okay, so just a quick agenda here. Yeah, so progress since our last draft meeting on the rate study. So we also, as Joe mentioned, met with our commercial stakeholders last Wednesday and proposed 2 alternative rate structures. So we'll be covering similar material this evening and running through those 2 alternatives. And then, we can take any questions and discussion after we kind of run through those 2 rate structures. And then I'll also just provide a very quick slide on some next steps. So feel free to interrupt as we get through this. So in April, Nugent presented an update on the water rate study, including the financial forecast as well as the methodology that they were using to allocate costs across different customer classes. And since then, staff and Nugent have continued refining the analysis, and we've developed these 2 rate structure approaches for our commercial customers. And again, we'll focus this discussion on those 2 alternatives and their potential impacts. So these are the 2 rate structure alternatives, and I'll walk through these one by one, but just to kind of highlight the first option, it reflects a rate structure that sets rates by consumption blocks. And this would be a completely new rate structure for our utilities department. The second option is a water budget alternative consistent with our current methodology, but it moves all commercial accounts to a more standardized water budgeting rate structure. And I just wanted to mention that our dedicated metered irrigation accounts are excluded from this analysis. Some of the commercial customers that we'll be talking about do have an indoor and outdoor component through a single meter. And as a result, this customer class is primarily, but not exclusively, comprised of indoor water users. So I just wanted to set the stage too. These are the commercial customers that are not on an irrigation meter.
And what percentage of the water delivery goes to commercial? I'm sorry.
I would need to take a closer look at that and I can get back.
A third, I mean, like, is it half and half? Is it a third?
Off the top of my head, I should know that, but we'll have to get back to it.
But like CU would fall into this.
They would.
And they're a large one, those three.
And they were present last week when we were talking to figures.
So this first option that we're discussing this evening is a block rate structure based on meter size. The basic premise here is that the more water you use, the more you pay per unit. These usage blocks are based on meter size. So larger meters have larger blocks compared to smaller meters, which would have these smaller consumption blocks. And then a nuance to this is that for our largest consumption accounts and our 6-inch meters, so our largest customers, we would propose a flat revenue neutral rate under this scenario, just because there aren't enough of those accounts to build a reliable block structure around. So we kind of separate the outliers and put them on a flat revenue neutral rate.
And again, that like CU would be a top.
Yep.
One of the top,
Correct. Are those outliers pretty consistent? Like, do they, those top five in terms of their water usage? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
You know what they are.
It's our industrial, it's mostly our industrial users, so, CU, NIST, Kindrel, Corden Pharmaceutical. So, within this first scenario, the rate schedule is proposing 4 pricing blocks. So at that lower block 1, it would be $6.73 per kgal, rising to $11.78 per kgal in block 4. Something important to note here is that the rates are the same regardless of the meter size. What really changes by meter size is where each block starts and stops. And I'll describe that more in the next slide. I'll also mention that, we're continuing to evaluate these block rates. These initial price differentials are intentionally conservative to allow staff to observe customer response and assess performance under a potential new rate structure. So anytime you're changing up the rate structure, you really kind of want to evaluate and see what customer behavior is like. And so this gradual progression is designed to support the transition while still reinforcing conservation signals. And right now, the way that this is structured, block 4 is about 75% higher than block 1, which is still a meaningful step up for high water users, but it's not an extreme one. And so this is a busy slide with a lot of values, but this slide is really intended just to show where each of the floor consumption blocks start and stop, and it's broken out again by meter size. As I mentioned, you'll notice that these block thresholds, they vary pretty widely by meter size, but each represents the same thing. So it's the point where usage shifts from typical to moderate to high for that meter size. And for the majority of our customers, they would not see those block 4 rates.
And medium commercial customer would roughly what meter size?
Medium would be in that block 1.
Okay, but I mean, in terms of the side, the meter side, the 3/4 and 20.
Oh, it's again pretty variable. We have a lot of our customers that are within the 3/4 inch to 1 inch.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
And as you kind of get larger, you see fewer
Very few
customers. And that's really why for the 6-inch customers, we only have a handful of those who really could build a reliable structured homes.
78% of our total account is residential.
Right.
And which are generally 3/4 or 1 inch meters.
Oh, okay.
yeah, so 22% is commercial.
So
there is
or residential or irrigation. Or municipal.
We have breaking news.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah. Let's say,
Okay, thank you.
6 inches the largest.
We have some customers with the 8-inch, but we don't have rates for those. They have a special agreement with us, but yeah, currently in code, it goes up to 6 inches. Are there any questions kind of about just, again, this is just a pretty quick overview, this is kind of where we're landing around the scenario 1. Still planning on making some tweaks based on what we heard and potentially tweaking those 4 block rates, but this is just a pretty straightforward rate structure that you see a lot of other communities using. And then I'll again kind of quickly get into the scenario 2. So this second option keeps our existing water budget rate structure, but it standardizes how budgets are calculated across all of these commercial customers. So right now, budgets for most of our commercial customers are based on individual usage history. And so that can swing pretty significantly from one year to the next. You can have, different types of customers move into the same space. And so that might cause a swing in that water budget calculation. One thing that we've tried to highlight in this scenario really is that there's a trade-off between predictability over customization. And even though customization might sound appealing, we found that it really doesn't work well for every single one of our customers. And it also remains a pretty heavy administrative burden for staff. So we're looking at something that is more predictable and easier for staff to administer and communicate to customers.
Is there an issue of fairness in this too? It's more standard, it's just fair, everybody has simple rates, or we're negotiate, is there potential for some to treat it better than others?
I think it really depends because there's such a high level of customization currently.
Yeah.
In either of these scenarios, it's gonna generate some customers who see cost savings and it's gonna cause other customers to pay more. So from that lens, it's hard to say if this, is checks that box across the board, but really what we're going for is something that's transparent and easy for staff to administer while still being equitable.
So what was the response?
It was pretty mixed. I have a slide here that kind of covers some high level things, but it was pretty mixed. I think for some of our large water users, they're really curious about what that flat volumetric rate looks like, whether or not that would apply to all of their accounts or just some of the high usage accounts that they have. Other customers, they really liked the simplicity of scenario one. And then some customers really do like the water budget and the pricing signal that like that highest tier communicates. So it really, I think it was a pretty mixed bag.
And I would say for a variety of reasons, we're going through this study at a pretty measured pace. And we're really striving we know not everyone's going to be happy. We can't make everyone happy, but if we can get consensus and general alignment on what we're proposing, that's what we're striving for. And meet our own goals of simplifying things. The system we have is way too complicated to manage.
And takes too much staff time.
It takes too much staff time, and when a customer calls and has a question about their account, or maybe somebody's moving into a new building, a new business. And it's like, it feels like you have to be like a 300 or 400 calls club to be able to explain it. And we need them to be at the same level to understand it. It's just not, it's not great.
Yeah.
So this like kind of breaks down the types of commercial accounts that we have, and even within like the 4 listed on the left, we have other sub accounts that would fall underneath. But really, like we can kind of roll it up to these 4 different account types. So what we would like to do is move everyone from the ES account we have, the efficiency standard, the plant investment fee, the PIF account that we currently have an average winter assumption account, and then we also have a historical monthly usage account. So really moving the AWC and those HMU accounts towards a more standardized, what we're calling a PIF account. And just to kind of break it down a little bit more, the water budgets for our AWC and HMU accounts, those are based on those individualized history-based budgets, where AWC is based on the average winter consumption, and then the historical monthly usage is based on a year average. So even there, we've got 2 different like calculations for these budgets. The AWC gets updated every April 1st, and then the HMUs get updated every January 1st. So they're not even on the same timeline. So what we would like to do in scenario 2 is move those AWC and HMU accounts to the plant investment fee, or the PIF account types. And PIF account types are really the standard account type now for the new customers. So whenever there's a new business or a new developer, whenever they want to connect to the water system, they're assigned a PIF account, and the water budget for that account is established based on the amount of PIF capacity that they purchase. And so what we would like to do again is move these legacy accounts over to a PIF account. I'll just mention, so for current accounts that are either ES or PIF, we would keep them on their current budgets, and they would not see any significant structural rate changes. They already have their budget set by objective factors like meter size, irrigable area, and the number of fixtures rather than their own usage history, so there's nothing to adjust their accounts. Might be wondering, how might we do this? So this is also still a work in progress, but what we've done and modeled to date is we picked 2025 as our baseline year. It's the most recent full year that we have, and it was also a normal weather year. And then from there, the water budget gets recalculated based on usage patterns within that account's meter size rather than that account's individual history. And then I've already mentioned, but this isn't a new concept, and it's pretty similar to the approach we already use for the brand new commercial accounts. I'll quickly mention that, we are comparing 2025 consumption to historical years for each account to identify any potential anomalies, because that could also exist with using a single baseline. I have kind of one more slide just on like the water budget recalculation. So this slide really illustrates how like the water budget would be recalculated for our commercial customers. So just kind of break it down, I'll try to break it down a little slowly, but feel free to interrupt me. So a water budget would be assigned to each of these percentiles of usage by meter size. So we would look at the 25th percentile, the 50th percentile, and the 85th percentile for each meter size. And then the HMU and the AWC accounts would be placed at either one of these 3 percentiles. So again, there's a budget for each percentile. We're taking the account, we're kind of looking at 2025 usage and assigning it a budget based on where they fall within these 3 percentiles. So the 25th percentile would represent a lower range of water use among customers with the same meter size. 50th percentile customer would represent what's typical among customers in that same meter size. And then the 85th percentile would represent a higher level of water use within the same meter size class. And it provides an allowance that accommodates customers with greater water needs. Again, we're still considering how we might account for outliers, especially if 2025 is not representative usage for some of these.
Just wondering, for 1,000 gallons of water use, do customers pay different rates? I mean, obviously I understand the black, we're putting that on the side, but I mean, they're paying different rates based on the size, how much water they use. I mean, what I wonder, does a larger water consumer effectively pay a lower rate than a lower water consumer, or a higher rate, or the same across the board?
It's a really complicated answer. It all depends on the budget that's assigned to that customer. So you could have a really large water user that has purchased a lot of water budget, and so they would effectively be paying lower rates because their budget is sized that,
It's all opinions. That bothers me because water is water, right? A gallon is a gallon, and you want to encourage conservation, you want to encourage wise use. When you buy something in the marketplace, now there are discounts sometimes for large users, but generally, we all pay the same. Well, I don't buy gas, I don't have a gas card anymore. You're buying gasoline or whatever. And so you want to encourage conservation. So if large users are effectively paying a lower rate, how does that encourage conservation?
But do large users need less operations and maintenance? Do large users, are there efficiencies realized by the utility that are related to larger users?
Well, I mean, they can pay for more water budget. And so the combination of what they pay up front and the rate that they pay over time.
It's both.
It's accounted for when you combine all of that. But I do understand what you're saying, that if you pay a lot upfront so that you have a more generous budget and lower rates, there's less incentive to conserve.
And the consumer doesn't have as much incentive. I mean, if we're using commercial entities to cut back on the ones that are using more water. Ultimately, you want the price you pay, for whatever products you have to reflect the cost of inputs. So if something is effectively, I'm not saying subsidized, but it's lower, I'll be careful, it's effectively lower. That doesn't send it, that doesn't encourage conservation by the user, but also by the consumer doesn't see the price signal displayed. When they're buying it, let's say it's going into a commercial product. That strikes me that you really want to have, you know, you want to type environments, you want to across the board just be sending uniform signals or similar signals, I should say, need for conservation.
Yeah.
That's putting aside things like block, right? I understand. But
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I will say that even though there's an opportunity for customers to pay for more budget upfront, what actually ends up happening is that most customers end up paying the lowest amount that they have to pay. And so they end up with the smaller budget.
Yeah.
And so it kind of works both ways. I mean, if you're flush with cash, right, like you would have paid more upfront costs to get a larger budget to then effectively pay a lower rate over time. Then and you have the means to do that, then I think we're still incentivizing conservation. We're still collecting more money up front, but that's, I would say, that sort of diverges from the status quo and typically have the brokers happen.
It's a good point, good discussion. What I might suggest is we could bring back a few examples.
Yeah,
Next time.
no, I just want to make sure I understand this. And the one thing that I think of the private sector more than the public, I mean, they're very cost sensitive, right? So they're always looking for ways to either increase their revenue, but also to reduce their costs. So I mean, yeah, I've seen that on the energy side. You know, they'll respond one way or another to try to reduce costs. So, but the point is to ensure that those price signals are clear.
I think examples would be helpful, like, you know, restaurants versus retail.
Yeah.
Stores.
Yeah, just because this was like a really quick hit, we had a larger topic ahead of this one. We did, when we presented to the large water users, we did provide like 5 examples that kind of showed status quo, what your rates might be under scenario 1 versus scenario 2. So I'm happy to also provide those as well, that help.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, 2 other questions. And one may be jumping to the next slide, so you can.
No, we're kind of through the analysis side, so.
So one question is, what's the timeline? And because ultimately you're gonna make a decision, and if you choose block, then this doesn't matter, right? The part of the concern that Joel is representing doesn't matter, but so I'm curious about the timeline, and maybe everybody else knows, but I don't. And then the second thing is, so I love this, you are assigning people. And then are you guys anticipating that half of these users are gonna quibble? Because it's like, oh, you assigned me to the 50th percentile, but I think I'm really more at 20. I mean, is this gonna, I understand the overall goal eventually is to get something that's easier, but when people find out where they're assigned, is they're gonna, you know, all hell break loose and everybody's gonna be calling you and saying, well, I shouldn't be in the 50th, I should be in the 25th.
So to answer your first question, so the implementation timeline for the new rate structure, we're hoping to be done with this analysis, this study by the end of the year, and then implementation would occur January 1 of 2028. There's still testing that we would need.
Right, okay.
Yep. So it's still over a year out.
But you would tell people what to expect.
Correct.
By sometime early next year. For 28, okay, cool, thank you.
And so this process that we've kind of got on the screen, it's still a work in progress. You know, the way that we're looking at it is we're sort of giving customers the benefit of their usage. And so if someone falls between the 25th and 50th percentile, we're bumping them up to the 50th percentile. And if someone falls between the 50th and the 85th, we're bumping them to the 85th as the analysis current stands. So we're giving them probably a little bit more budget within, you know, these 3 options. Another option that we haven't really talked about, but I think we could probably kind of go there, is if we removed the 25th percentile, so that would just really impact like the lowest of the lowest users, and maybe just going with the 50th and an 85th. But again, we're still tweaking it and we're still,
Okay,
yeah, refining our process.
people get bumped up automatically as opposed to,
Right.
thank you.
Good question. And so just, I'll run through this slide really quickly. This is, we kind of touched on it earlier, but what we heard, so throughout this engagement, these are sort of the big themes that have emerged. So customers have really emphasized the importance of a fair and understandable rate structure. We feel like you get that in scenario one. They've also supported maintaining conservation signals, but also highlighted the need for flexibility, especially if operations or business types change. And then finally, you know, customers really stress the importance of clear communication and support as we move towards new standards. So making sure we're moving, you know, in tandem with customers and bringing them along.
I'll just ask a question, we don't have data centers in Boulder, ports that blow us out of the water, so to speak, guys.
We have one.
Yeah, the IBM facility has always been a data center, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
There's a couple much smaller ones, but.
And they have their water.
And I think they're, in real time, they're refining their water use, so it's less impactful. Energy still remains a bit. Yeah.
And so these are sort of the immediate next steps. It doesn't list out that January 1, 2028 timeline date that we mentioned earlier, but in late August, we'll have our residential stakeholder outreach. And then the plan would be to present the water rate analysis to the board in the fall, and then at some point in spring of next year, present these findings to city council.
Thank you.
Wow.
And deliberate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah. So the next item on the agenda is matters from the board. Does anyone have any matters from the board?
Just update on drought situation, water supply.
I was gonna get that under matters from staff.
All right, very good.
So if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll start with that one. So for water supply update, our situation is pretty stable, all things considered. We didn't quite fill Barker, but we almost filled all of our reservoirs, and so feeling good about that. I've been paying close attention to our usage, and of course, there's no way to prove it, but I think our messaging has been effective because usage trends have been at about average and even less.
Wow.
People are responding to the rain events, and it seems like they're turning off their sprinklers and turning them back on when it warms up again. And just with the type of year we're having, without the messaging, without any action, I believe we would be way over typical use. And so I think the good news is our situation is stable. Talked to the neighboring municipalities last week, similar story there, varies a little bit, but we're staying in touch. So big picture, that's what I have on that one. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, you may have seen it in a press release from the city, but at the Boulder Reservoir, we had a water quality event.
Yeah.
This weekend, and closed the swim beach on Saturday, and I believe again today. Out of an abundance of caution, work together with our Parks and Recreation staff. And the situation was an algae bloom, and I don't know that we've had that before, but that's, as conditions warm, that's becoming more and more of a thing for lower elevation reservoirs. We have had closures of the beach before for water quality issues around E. coli and bacteria, so we're monitoring that, and if you would like, I can move to the upcoming agenda.
I guess, is there any action being taken around the algae bloom other than monitoring and communication to and shutting down the swim beach?
I think right now the priority is doing sampling and testing, which for the, I'm not an expert in it, but for the particular issue that we're worried about, I think that takes time for those tests to get back, so that's the immediate thing. I think all the work we're doing with the Eurasian water milfoil and trying to manage that. There are things like that that we're doing, but with the algae blooms, I think we would have to get back to you in a future meeting. I'm not personally aware that there's a lot that we can do about that.
So no, there is no action. There is no
Treatment.
treatment or.
We do have a cyanobacteria monitoring and response plan, so they do testing and monitoring, I think largely recreationally. We just try to get people to not touch the water. We're not treating off the reservoir, and so if we were to treat off the res, it might be a different story, but because we have the Carter Lake pipeline right now, I think it really is this monitoring and communicating, like you said, and we can report back if I'm wrong about that, but.
And it's, I mean, we're having a week of 90-degree plus on top of 90-degree plus. I assume the algae love that and will be growing, so.
So it's pretty clear it's temperature, it's not some other source contaminant or something. It's probably most likely temperature is driving this.
Yeah, Chris DeVille, Deputy Director of Operations. I'm not aware that they've identified a external source that's really driving this. I think honestly, it's a lot of sunlight, hot temperatures, and compared to historical practice, lower water exchange in the res. That water body is not getting nearly as much turnover as it used to.
So why is that?
Lower oxygen.
I think, I think there's just less in and out from the res compared to historical conditions because of the pipeline and canal and other just direct uses, and not as much in and out of the res as an exchange reservoir. I will just quickly comment. I know the other closures have been that are more bacteria related. The leading cause was believed to be the goose poop and all the activity on the beach. So I know the parks team aggressively increased their cleaning and kind of behaviors around those areas right there adjacent to, so to prevent kind of that direct runoff and implications there for the swim beach area.
We can come back. I mean, it's just the initial discovery of this and investigating right now, so we can come back with more detail probably under matters next month. If that works. Okay.
And I just want to ask them a follow. I mean, it sounds like it's good on the water use, so there's no need. I know I've seen stories of other municipalities actually putting fines maybe because they're mandatory restrictions, they're monitoring individuals, but from our point, even there's no need here.
We're not there.
Something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. All right.
Ready for that common schedule?
Yeah.
It's getting close, but we're still gonna make 8 o'clock. So August, it'll be clear the whole calendar, the whole agenda, and do an in-depth thing on the capital improvement program, focusing on what we're recommending for rates and what we're looking at for 2027. And then in September, there'll be an action item on that in a public hearing for the CIP and rates, probably room in that meeting for more than that, or possibly a tour. But we'll size that up as we get closer. And then in October, we'll follow up on the rate study. It's slated for an action item right now. May or may not be that, and an information item on water quality policy updates. And that's what we have slated for now.
Sounds good.
That's September meeting, just so you know, that's Yom Kippur, but I think because of various things that are going on, I wouldn't advise moving it or anything. I think we'll just take a look.
If we need to poll people for a different date, we haven't done that a lot in the last few years, but we can do that.
Generally,
I'm leaving the next day for Michael for 3 weeks, so I don't want you. But I also don't want you, I mean, if there's,
Could be earlier too.
if a,
Later is fine.
if there's a tour that's far, because
Yeah,
we're gonna be coming from
yeah,
synagogue, so don't make it earlier than usual schedule.
earlier in the day.
In the day,
or earlier
yeah.
in the month.
Oh, earlier in the day.
Yeah, no, we would. That's.
Well, you just said tour, so I was like.
Yeah.
Possibly we could move it to the Monday before.
Oh, my God.
Also, okay, it's a little.
I'm hearing a real time.
What is it?
Reality.
That's fine. Okay.
Okay, for the August meeting, I will need to be remote that day. Is that okay?
From the call.
No, so, for my, there's,
Oh, yeah.
great, thank you.
Right, well, thanks, Joe. If there are any other matters, if there aren't any other matters, from staff or board, we can make a motion to adjourn, motion to adjourn.
So.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Okay. We're adjourning the meeting at 7:56. Yes, thank you so much, yes, thank you all. Thank you so much, Chad, for all of your information.